Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop, Emerald Planet. All the ecology news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's your host, Executive Director of the Emerald Planet, Dr. Sam Lee Hancock.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are making a difference as we move through the 21st century. And so how do we prepare the next generations to be very much involved in climate change and all the issues that we're facing as the planet goes to 9 billion people? And how do we involve young generations to make sure that they're actually learning today the skills, the technologies, the processes that they're going to need to produce the food, the fuel, and the fiber that we're going to have as we go towards 2050. And we have two gentlemen that are with us. One is joining us by Skype, the other sitting in the studio with me. We have Dave Finnigan, who is the founding director, and then Sudheer Shukla, who is the DC area and Maryland coordinator. And this organization is called Climate Change is Elementary. And we're going to go to Dave first and chat with him, and we'll be alternating between Dave and Sudheer. So Sudheer, welcome to Emerald Planet, the studio. And Dave, welcome to the Emerald Planet. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine down here in sunny Florida.
It's probably about as hot there as here, but tell us a little bit about the background and purpose of Climate Change is Elementary.
Well, the background is that there are 40 million elementary and preschool kids enrolled in about 100,000 schools in the United States. And together with their parents, they total over 30% of the population of the U.S. And there are three things that I'd say about these kids and their parents. First, they're the least active in terms of climate issues. Second, they have the most to lose. And third, once they get activated, they have the most potential to affect change because they have the longest term stake in the future. If you toss in the grandparents, then over half the population is involved. Now, we've tested and refined the program in 23 schools in a half dozen states, but we still need to work out the details and refine it further as it grows. It's scalable, however, because PTAs want this information and they're happy to pay our presenters for their time and efforts. Our presenters are professionals, by the way, and they can easily net $500 every day they're in the school. So that's the background. The purpose is to get families to take action to lower their carbon and water footprint. And we do this by having parents and children work together on a family sustainability checklist of all the things they promise to do to be good climate citizens. And then we connect the families to vendors of the products and services that are on those checklists. And those vendors give sizable rebates to the PTA at the school for actions by the families. For instance, if I put solar panels on my roof, then one of our vendors will give my kid's school $750 to $1,000. And if I install solar hot water, my school gets $200. And for an energy audit, the school can get $50. And if I promise to shift, or if I actually sign to shift my energy to wind, then they get $30. And even local hybrid and electric car dealers are willing to give schools rebates for actions by parents. So this can become a long-term stealth fundraiser for the school, just like box tops for education. I like to say, as we green our homes, our school makes green.
Well, I think that's really a good motto because all the schools are very stressed. They need to have more funding as far as the after-hours types of educational program. And I know that you're very much involved in that. Sudheer, I know that you're working actually in the schools directly in the Washington, D.C. region. Tell us a little bit about what is a typical day as far as what goes on in the schools?
Well, we start with a teachers meeting in the morning. So we get the teachers on board in terms of climate change, that it's happening, that it's real, and it's a problem, and we can address it if we start acting now. And during the day, we have a grade level presentation for each grade that's age appropriate. And we focus on one animal or ecosystem and how climate change is affecting that animal or ecosystem. And we make it fun and engaging by having music and games and activities. And at the end of the school day, we have an all-school assembly where we talk about climate change in general, what's causing it, and what we can do to address it by becoming more energy efficient and switching to clean energy. And we also talk about family night in the evening. And the family night...
So what you're doing is during the day you're interacting with the teachers, the students, and probably the administration in each of these schools that are involved.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the evening you're transitioning to, in essence, family time, correct?
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, go ahead. And what goes on in the evening?
So we bring in the parents in the evening and we kind of catch them up on climate change, in terms of what we talk to the kids about during the day. And then we talk about specific solutions the parents and families can do in terms of energy efficiency and clean energy, getting a home energy audit, installing solar panels, switching to wind energy. And then we pass out these sustainability checklists that Dave was talking about. And we ask them to sign up for things that they can do by the time their kids graduate from high school.
So these are very practical things then, Sudheer, where they're going in, and it may be some families say, hey, we can exchange and put all LED lighting in our home, and that'll be about what they'll do. Others will go, to recycling and, doing, no water type of gardens and those kinds of things, all the way up, as you say, the hot water, solar, the solar panels, and then also maybe even selecting the wind power to power their homes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do they go about doing that? Is that part of the checklist, and how do you monitor that?
Well, yeah, that's something we're working on. So we have connections with vendors, as Dave was talking about, that every time a family chooses their services, the school gets a rebate. So this acts as a kind of fundraiser for the school. And it's also a way of measuring our progress in terms of how much money we can raise for the school and how much families can take action in terms
Fantastic. So it's very practical, hands-on type of things, but it's really family by family.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Okay. Dave, how do you identify your presenters? I know you said they're professionals in the field, and then what are some of the duties that they have, and then how do they engage the faculty, the administration, students, and the parents, and then what kind of things do they do to make sure that it's fun? We keep using this term fun, but it's really interesting, it's engaging, and people really want to be a part of what's going on throughout the day and into the family time in the evening.
Well, I think we designed our program to be the opposite of those programs that show scary slides and tell people here's how terrible it's going to be when everything goes wrong. Instead, we show slides about the clean and green future and how we're going to get there. And we say here's how great it will be when everything goes right, when we do it all. And so far, our 25 trainees have all self-selected for training. They're positive people, and they all have experience either working in schools or with children, or they have public speaking or entertainment ability. I call our program edutainment because they have to be good teachers, but they also have to be captivating and able to keep the kids' attention and able to transition to grown-ups as well. Their duty is to spend a really grueling day in the school, from the teachers' meeting in the morning to family night in the evening, with slides and songs and games for the kids to play. And they have to be experts on climate change and be able to simplify the complexities of science for the kids and for the parents. But most of all, they really need to love and work well with kids. To the teachers, they become subject matter experts. And to the parents, they are a connection to the vendors. And to the kids, they're facilitators of a fun day where the kids get to play games and sing songs and see slides and learn while they're doing it. So they really need to be all around edutainers.
Yeah, and looking at this, I went back to a couple of these slides where you can see the engagement and the excitement on the faces of these children. And some of these, like this one young man, is just like, I am really learning about what's going on here. You can just see how studious it is and the intensity of his gaze. It's absolutely fantastic. This is the world of now. This is something, Sudheer, that I know when you're looking at interacting with all the teachers and and you're trying to do things just like Emerald Planet. We say we're the good news team, and you're the good news team as well. And so looking at the environment, we see the world of today, and this sketch is going to be on the book Clean and Green in 2115. So how do we transition so people are not looking at this as a very scary thing, but it's something that we can do this, we can actually lower the costs for the family and the future, and at the same time we can improve the environment?
Well, so I think that's basically why Dave was working on this book, Clean and Green in 2115, that we have a positive goal to focus on, rather than saying how bad things are going to be if we do everything wrong. This is how good things are going to be when we do everything right. And it has specific, so it's going to be connected with the Family Sustainability Checklist, where every action you do is going to have, you're going to see the consequence in a pictorial way. Yeah,
I think I really like this. I'm going to go back between the two of these, and we see what it's the ideal as far as 2115 is concerned. We can bring that up, and this is the here and now, where we see some of this urban farming and gardening going on in the middle with, all this urban activity. And Dave, as you know, that's something that's certainly as appropriate as by 2050, they're saying 80% of the world's population will be living in urban areas, and many of them within just 300 cities across the globe. So it's going to be a real challenge. So tell us a little more about your forthcoming book, Clean and Green in 2115.
Well, we are going to do a crowdfunding campaign in order to get the money to finish the book and to print the first edition, and everybody who contributes is going to get a free book. So that's going to start in the fall. But the whole idea is that without a roadmap, you really can't tell where you're going. And there are plenty of books that tell how terrible the world's going to be if we do everything wrong. So ours is the one that tells you how great it's going to be when we do everything right. And as Sudheer said, we take each page from the Family Sustainability Checklist, and we make that item, that put solar panels on your roof.
David, you got to be quick. We got 10 seconds left.
Oh, okay. We make that into word games and science facts and math challenges, and then the kids get to take that home, and it's going to be sticky. They're going to really want to stick on that book and do the things that are in the book, and that'll help the parents to do the right thing.
Okay, we're going to leave this up. This is what the front of the book, of course, is a Clean and Green in 2115, and the here and now is in the upper corner of that. This was David Finnigan, who is the founding director of the Climate Change is Elementary, and Sudheer's with us as we create the Emerald Planet.
Too many women get hit by their boyfriends and husbands. Too many women are pressured into having unprotected sex. Half of the people in the world living with AIDS are women. It doesn't have to be this way. Together, we can change this reality. Let's strive for a world free of violence.
At Volunteers of America, we don't just give kids a way to stay off the streets. We give them the tools they need to reach their full potential. We don't just help the elderly receive needed care. We help them live life to the fullest. We don't just provide food for homeless individuals and families. We provide job training and placement so they can buy groceries. Volunteers of America is a national organization that for over 100 years has provided programs and services that allow people to overcome their challenges to become vital members of their community. At Volunteers of America, we don't just help people, we help people help themselves. Find out how you can support the programs that are working in your community. Contact Volunteers of America today. Call 1-800-899-0089.
Drivers face all kinds of distractions.
Guys, stop playing. No. 127 consecutive.
Before your wireless phone becomes one of them, stop. Drive safely. Keep your phone in easy reach and dial sensibly. In bad weather or traffic, call later and use a hands-free device. Remember, with wireless, safety is your call.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we look around the globe in 144 different nations looking for those 1,000 best practices, the technologies, the services, and the products that are going to take us through the 21st century. A 21st century that's becoming much more violent as far as climate change is concerned, great concerns over weather conditions, and at the same time, as we add 2 billion new people to the planet, how we're going to be able to take care of these people, the food, the fuel, the fiber, everything that they need, plus the basic infrastructure. And of course, one of the challenges we have is how do we address this whole notion of CO2, greenhouse gas emissions, into the environment. And I have a gentleman sitting right beside me that's doing a lot of research, a real expert in that, Scott Nystrom. He is a Senior Economic Associate at the Regional Economic Models, Inc. And Scott, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. We're going to go over some of these very intriguing slides, a summary of the research you've been doing, but tell us a little bit about the Economic Associates.
Sure. What we did here is we were commissioned by a group called Citizens Climate Lobby, which is a private grassroots citizens group that's advocating for a revenue-neutral carbon tax in the United States at the federal level. And they commissioned us, we're a small software firm based out of Massachusetts and Washington, D.C., to do an economic study of this. And I'll note on our perspective, all the results that we're going to discuss in a moment. We're strictly nonpartisan, non-political. We're not advocating anything. We're a research group. We grew out of a university in Massachusetts. And I'll also note that all the results you're going to see in this economic carbon tax study is a fiscal result. It's a tax study. It doesn't depend on any assumptions about the long-term effects of climate variability, so increased storms, droughts, sea level rises. In order for the results to work, it's purely an economic study and an economic model that's used by the states, by the federal government, and throughout the world to assess tax policy and energy policy.
I think this is what's really intriguing and very important about this, Scott, because you're really looking at this balance between the environment and the economy, but looking at purely from a fiscal impact,
yes,
and not just as far as climate change is concerned. And so that takes a lot of some of the passion out of it, but at the same time some of the politics, and you're just looking at the numbers. So usually we're doing this exchange, Q&A and all that, but the slides that you brought and provided are so intriguing. I think we're just going to kind of march through these. Let's talk about it. And so let's just we're going to leave these slides up, move through it. Tell us about the 9 regions, and then we're just going to move forward.
Sure. And as you mentioned a second ago, is obviously with the climate issue, almost always the conversation about taxing energy or taxing fossil energy or taxing carbon is, but it'll be bad for the economy. And given that this country needs something like 8 million more jobs after the recession a few years ago, it's always been a non-starter that it would be maybe bad for the economy. So what we're looking at here is what would it actually do inside of a standard macroeconomic model. We did it at those 9 colorful regions that you all saw, which are standard federal regions. So this here, total employment, regional employment, actually looks at what happens to the United States' employment levels, so the number of jobs in each region in each year. And in all regions, they're actually positive impacts. There are more jobs with a revenue-neutral carbon tax. So we're looking at the net effect of job creation from cutting taxes versus jobs destruction from increasing energy prices. So there are more jobs in the economy. It's about, the next one, this is GDP, so a similar concept, but now instead of jobs, we're looking at output. So while it's about 2 flat to 3 flat million jobs over a baseline, it is also some extra billions of dollars a GDP for the United States.
Well, let's go back to this regional employment, and this is something we go back, and let's put this chart up here, because this is something that most people can grasp, and this is a little difficult. Looking at the 9 regions and the job growth, what is bringing this about, this job growth?
Sure.
Because this is always the question, is that we're going to lose all these jobs, they're going to be either shift overseas, or they're just going to disappear. And what you're saying is this is not the case at all.
Well, it has to do with the nature of the industries that are affected. The fossil fuel industry as a whole, just to pick one number out of the hat, there's about 700,000 jobs in oil and gas extraction in the United States. That's why the kind of bluish region there, the West South Central, which is Texas and Oklahoma, is seeing job losses. So while there's about less than 1 million jobs in oil and gas, there's well over 20 million jobs in healthcare. There's over 18 million jobs in retail. So the industries that are affected by consumer spending tend to generate more jobs, and with revenue neutral, it goes back into the economy, it can have a positive effect.
Okay, all right, very good. All right, baseline versus alternative. What does this really mean to the average citizen that's watching the program?
Everybody talks about this in relatively, I want to say apocalyptic, but exaggerated terms, that this would have a huge impact in the economy. It would mean millions of jobs either way. What this graph is meant to show, it's a little hard to see, and that's actually the point, is between the baseline, which is no carbon tax, and the alternative, the gold line, which is a carbon tax. Notice that it's almost impossible to tell the difference. The economy is so large, so complex, and that taxing carbon and taxing energy would actually have an appreciably small effect on it, even in context. It's a positive effect for the nation, but even then a small one, and even for, again, the West South Central region, the oil states, it's relatively close to a neutral impact.
Well, many of these, as far as the energy jobs, as far as fossil fuels are concerned, is that there's not that great amount of jobs available. There's the good value added as far as the economy is concerned, but it's not a tremendous amount of jobs. So looking at this baseline versus alternative, what kind of jobs we're talking about? We talked about retail, we talked about maybe alternative energy production, things like that. What else goes into this so that people can understand the complexity that you just talked about as far as GNP?
Sure. The reason you get, again, the jobs and the output that you do into this situation is because think about yourself when you spend money. What do you spend it on? Generally, housing is any person's biggest expense, and that's a large part of the economy. So housing, rents, real estate, automobiles and transportation, particularly automobiles because they have to be replaced often. Also, just general consumer spending, both for food, retail products, electronics, and also personal services, accounting, healthcare, dental work, all those kind of things. Those all tend to be very local, and they tend to be very labor intensive. There's a lot of jobs associated with them. If you take money from the part of the economy that's used for capital-intensive industry, like oil and gas, refining, coal mining, and you move it through this rebate, through this revenue neutrality to consumer spending, you get a positive impact in those service-based industries that tend to be domestic and tend to be labor-intensive. They can't be outsourced to a sense.
Yeah. So what we're looking at then in this whole GDP by industry, what you're showing is that there may be some declines as far as oil and natural gas, what have you, but it could be gains. And I guess as the population ages, we're looking at about 87.5 million, plus or minus, and the baby boomers. And so they're getting to the stage of life where they're looking for more services and also may be engaged in a different level as far as the economy is concerned. How does this factor in the age disparity from the baby boomers, the rapidly aging population, down to less children that are under, say, the age of 25 and below?
Sure. The way that consumer spending is done in our system is it's based on age demographics. That is, it understands that a 5-year-old consumes much differently than a 15-year-old, than a 25-year-old, than a 45 or a 65 or an 85. If you look at any major metro area in the United States, and it's the most exaggerated in, say, Arizona or Florida, over time, healthcare is a major growth industry. It has nothing to do necessarily with, say, competitiveness. It has nothing to do with policy. It's pure demographics. As the boomers get to their peak healthcare years, they're going to buy a lot of that stuff.
Now, in this, what are we looking at? What's this actually telling us?
This is a breakout for manufacturing specifically. There's a quirk in the way the government counts manufacturing statistics, that it counts petroleum refining, so the production of refined petroleum products, mostly gasoline, as a manufacturing industry. The idea here is if you take the bottom two out, refining and chemical feedstocks to refining, the impact of manufacturing is essentially zero. And actually there are some manufacturing industries under a carbon tax that have a positive impact, like motor vehicles, mostly because people are going to buy cars more often now because prices have gone up. They're renewing the fleet faster.
Now, looking at manufacturing, of course, now there's this huge shift into natural gas, moving away from coal and even crude oil as far as using it as an energy source. And then, of course, you're looking at what about 37% of the energy that's imported or used goes into transportation. So what shifts are we seeing in this manufacturing area that actually is positive for the economy versus maybe being a negative?
Sure. The biggest one is indeed, again, when you go to a grocery store and you buy that cereal box, there's a complex supply chain behind it. There's somebody who had to put the box together. There's someone who had to refine or compile the food, and then there's a farmer somewhere in a field who grew it, a grain farmer. So when you go, again, consumer spending is the important one here. When you buy more food, you're also helping the industry that produces the actual food all the way back to the rancher or the farmer, and that's what's actually helping the manufacturing sectors, is who's actually buying the final good.
And if you look at that, it's just food is concerned as far as the manufacturing. You're looking at all the packaging is concerned, the vehicles that do the deliveries and all that, the physical space where this processing is going on. Do you see like these jobs by industry as where there may actually be an increase as far as the number of jobs, or is automation, looking at computers and robots and all that actually, reducing or producing less jobs as far as the economy is concerned?
The idea, the increase in productivity, the mechanization, the automation that you're describing is present in the model in its kind of underlying structure. It happens all the time. And you are right that there are certain industries like manufacturing, and actually for that matter fossil fuel generation, that long ago happened, which is why a lot of the service sectors like healthcare, where there is only so much automation that can be done or it can be done slower, are the ones that really have the long-term job creation.
Looking at CO2 emission reduction, I know this is something that in this model you've looked at, you've studied. Where are we headed?
Well, according to all the federal sources, most of the academic literature, and our modeling, if we do nothing, no price on carbon, our emissions are essentially flat, about the same as 1990 levels, about 5 billion tons per year. But if we implement the carbon tax that CCL is advocating, not us, CCL, which is $10 a year starting in 2016 and then escalating to $200 by 2035, so a linear escalation, it basically halves our carbon emissions in the next 20 years.
That's very dramatic if you look at the drop that we have here. So what's this monthly dividend? We got to be quick. We're almost running out of time.
Their idea for redistributing the money is as simple as can be. It's modeled off to the way Alaska does it with its royalty fund, where all the money comes in from the carbon tax and then is mailed out to every family on a household per capita basis every month, and this is showing roughly how much that would be.
Go ahead.
And then the next one, if you want to get into that, this is an important one because it drives a lot of the carbon results. This is a model that we ran of the North American power grid that shows what would happen in the power market and the energy market. The blue one at the bottom is coal, the red one in the middle is nuclear power, the orange one in the middle is gas, and the ones at the top, green is wind, and then gold is solar. The idea is on the left, that's status quo, where we're getting more gas and losing nuclear, and then on the right we have a situation where coal becomes uncompetitive because of the carbon tax. Nuclear is much larger, and wind is an even larger set than that.
And we can say air quality is going to increase.
Yep, you get rid of the coal plants, you lose a lot of NOx, SOx, soot, and there you go.
Well, this is very interesting, and thank you for sharing with us. We need to have you come back and talk about this. And thank you for being with us as we talk about this, as we move towards the future, as we create the Emerald Planet. Nicely done.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip at AOL.com.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States as we're looking for those what we call the best of the best practices that are available and can be used by people all over the planet to address severe climate change, at the same time to increase the quality of life. And of course, one of the great changes that are going on as we move towards 2050 is the use of alternative energy of all types. And so it's wind, wave, solar, hydrogen, many other opportunities as far as the technologies, the services, and the products, while at the same time we want to bring that to the average citizen so that they actually are part of generating that electrical power. And so we have a gentleman who's actually, in a sense, leading the band in all that. This is Brett Wiley. He is the Director of Energy Programs at a very intriguing named organization called Groundswell.
Yeah.
And so, Brett, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you for having me.
And we have your logo in the background. What is Groundswell?
Yes, so Groundswell is a nonprofit consumer advocate. And what we're doing is that, we're educating people, we're organizing them, and we're creating access for the people. So when we're educating people, we're talking to them about their energy bills and how they're using energy. Hopefully that spurs a lot of people to be interested in then making changes to how they're using energy. We're organizing with community leaders and volunteers and organizations and individuals to bring them into a group, and then by bringing them into a group, they have purchasing power. We use that purchasing power then to allow them and create access for them to purchase clean energy. Typically, they're not able to because they're priced out. Clean energy is still in an early stage, and so it can be expensive.
Yeah, but looking at the whole thing about the clean energy, I know that just like in looking at solar, the prices for solar has dropped by over 70%. Mm-hmm. Massive wind farms are going up all over the United States. Yeah. And many farmers now are actually making more revenue off of their wind farms, a portion of what they're doing versus the crops, the cattle, and all that. Mm-hmm. So why is it so important to open access so that citizens become not only the consumers, which is really the way it's been all in the past, to where they're actually becoming the producers of that, and not only are they using it for their own properties, but also being able to put it back into the grid.
That's a great point. So like I said, clean energy is in a new sector. If you look at, for example, automobiles, right? Automobiles started in the early 1900s. Automobiles have had 120 years or more to kind of get up into a place where now we have electric vehicles, and electric vehicles are great because you can potentially power them by renewable sources. Clean energy is not the same way. Clean energy has just come online in the past few decades. And so since it's still in its early stages, we have the ability to demonstrate how are we going to create a new sector in our economy, and how can we bring everyone and lift everyone up at the same time as we're creating a new sector, instead of being exclusive and leaving people out. And if we're doing that early in a new economic sector, then that's going to be the baseline and the norm as we move forward. And the biggest obstacle for clean energy is price. And so at Groundswell, what we're doing is by using collective purchasing power, we're reducing the cost of that clean energy, and thus allowing more people to come in who typically could not afford so.
Well, looking at this as far as the green school is concerned, I know this is something that's all over the region as far as Washington, D.C. and the United States is concerned, but there are many major cities around the United States, but all across the globe that are getting involved in this. So as we see more of the solar, the wind, even the hydrogen and other types of alternative energy, how do you feel that's affecting people in their own local communities and making them feel part of this new green future?
Yeah, by switching to clean energy, whether you're reducing your own energy use by insulating your home, you put solar panels on your roof, or you switch to wind power, you're reducing the use of fossil fuels. And in doing that, you're having better air quality, so we're having healthier communities. And also, you mentioned in the last question about like, what should we be doing to allow people to be included not only as consumers of this energy, but producers? And people can own their own energy systems. If you put solar on your roof and you join one of our groups and you allow that to be even more affordable and accessible, then you and your community are owning your own energy system. So for example, if we have a blackout, like we do sometimes in DC and in other communities across the country, instead of your lights going off, your lights will stay on because you own that energy, and so do your neighbors.
Now looking at this, I'm going to pop back and forth between, because here you have elderly people sitting around, or which I guess we probably should say mature, and then you have youth involved in this. So between these groups, it looks like you're bringing all these people together.
Yes.
And so what is the impact that you're having as far as them feeling like they really can change the future by being involved in producing and using clean energy?
Yeah, well, you have to make it easy and simple, and we're doing that. So when someone joins our collective purchasing group, we're being very inclusive. Anyone who pays an electricity bill can join our purchasing group. And that includes schools, like you had shown before. Patterson Park Public Charter School in Baltimore, over the next 3 years, will save $17,000 on their energy bills.
Let's say that again, because there are many principals watching this that would like to hear that number.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so to be clear, Patterson Park Public Charter in Baltimore is going to save $17,000 over the next 3 years by switching to 100% wind power in our purchasing group. So they're on dirty energy now, they're switching to wind power, and they're going to save $17,000 as a result. And that's because we're using the community's purchasing power and negotiating with energy businesses that want that business. But we have stipulations, and one is affordability, and it's also a valid clean energy source. And so, being inclusive towards people and also hearing about what people need. And I think that's, one of the ways that, when you're showing these pictures of who's in our group and who we're working with, it's going to be a wide range of people.
Well, you have a broad net, and it's very important to be inclusive no matter where you are in the community, socioeconomic or your geographical location. But I know that you're very much involved as far as communities of faith, and this goes across all various faiths.
That's right.
So what are the rabbis, the ministers, the imams, the priests saying about this opportunity of bringing clean energy into their various congregations, regardless of religious background?
Yeah,
or non-religious background? I guess we need to start including the atheists and all the others in this as well.
Yeah, so when we're working with faith institutions, we find that they're some of the easiest groups to work with. Maybe they don't know about clean energy, maybe they can't afford it right now, but they have, in faith and in religion, there's a sense of care for creation. We are endowed by our Creator with whatever your religion is, whatever you believe, by taking care of the planet that we live on today. And so, coal power and a lot of other fossil fuels, oil, that's not really caring for our planet. You look at what's happened just a few years ago in the Gulf, right? We had a
talking about the BP spill.
BP oil spill, yeah.
Right.
That's not caring for our planet. That's not caring for our communities. And faith institutions are anchors in their community, and they want to stand up and be leaders and demonstrate what's possible. And so when we're working with, for example, Adat Shalom and St. Stephen's and all these other faith communities across the region, they're being leaders in their community for their congregations, but also for everyone else that sees them as leaders, even if they don't go to that church or institution.
I noticed in the photographs that you've provided for this, and these are real people that are doing real projects within their community.
Real, regular people.
And the whole thing about it, you have many women involved in all ages. So what is attractive about clean energy and women becoming more and more engaged in their communities, but at the same time, they're becoming leaders in this whole movement towards a better environment?
Yeah, I would say, so inclusivity goes also towards being more inclusive to create a clean energy economy where women are leaders. In our current economy, you look at Wall Street, who's leading Wall Street? It's white men. And so when we're looking at creating the clean energy economy, anyone can lead the clean energy economy. And I think, women and mothers in particular feel this very strongly. There are children and dads too. We want to be inclusive of all parents. Putting clean energy in your home, whether that's, like I said, through solar or wind power, energy efficiency, it's about not only taking care of now in the present, we have to be very present-minded, but it's also about leaving a better planet for future generations. And that's something that we can do today, and it's very possible and accessible, and we're making it affordable.
Well, looking at this as far as families are concerned and the leadership in the community, but if you have this clean energy in the schools, how is this being told to, taught, and shared with the parents, the faculty, and the students, so they know actually what is going on within their building and how then they can take those very good ideas and take it right along with them back home?
Yep. Well, I mentioned, part of Groundswell in our work is the first step is education. Schools are great for education, right? So when a school switches in our group purchase to wind power, they get a banner for their school. So every time that kids and staff and parents are coming and going out of their school, they know that the school that their children go to or that they're working in is powered by wind. It's better for our future, and it's better for where we're living right now. But we also work with the parent-teachers associations and the teachers and allow them to teach their students about what does it mean to switch to wind power, and then for the parents, how can they do this in their own homes? So after a school switches, we bring the PTA, and we have the PTA also join our group purchase.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. And looking at this building here, I know this is something that where you actually have the clean energy, but at the same time you're putting in the water gardens and doing various very environmentally friendly streetscapes. And so this seems to all go hand in hand, is that as you're doing one thing, you keep expanding the opportunities and the ways to improve the environment.
Well, to be clear, we're not doing any
no, we know that.
Any energy programs or any
That's
water
not
programs.
what I said.
Yeah. But
That's
I think
what I said. The whole fact is that if you look at this, these are actually rain gardens. You're getting this, and so whether you're actually doing this or not, it's actually generating more ideas and opportunities for people to be engaged in the environment.
Of course, it's switching to wind power, which anyone can do with their electricity bill, is a simple, easy thing to do. But it also opens up, like you're saying, the opportunity for people to do a lot more that's more deeply impactful.
Yeah, well, I'm going to always end up with this. I just love this Climate Summit. But anyway, Brett, thank you for being with us. Brett Wiley, who is the Director of Energy Programs, Groundswell, doing really good work with schools and communities. And thank you for being with us as we look around the globe to create the Emerald Planet.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's some matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about rigged out money. Nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home?
When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water.
At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site.
That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff.
You know what the best part is?
What?
More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's
ask? Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People, the flood is imminent! Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters, collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop Emerald Planet. Here again, your host, Dr. Sam.
Hello, and welcome to the Emerald Planet as we come to you from Washington, D.C. in the United States. I'm Dr. Sam Hancock, the President, Executive Director of Emerald Planet and Director and host of Emerald Planet TV. We come to you on a weekly basis to bring you the 1,000 best practices, those who we're identifying and bringing on a regular basis from 144 different nations, so we can share across thousands of different communities the very best ways to address climate change and also how to increase the quality of life for all living beings on the planet. And we have someone who's actually coming in sharing a kind of a new but renewed topic, looking at rural communities and climate change and also climate. As we know, more and more people are moving into urban areas. The world now is a majority urban with over 54% population. But if you look at the United States, 80%, Brazil, 87%, and so by 2050, it's projected 80% of the people will be living in the urban areas, but that leaves the other 20% living in more rural areas. And Tara Ritter, who is the Program Associate of Climate and Rural Communities at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, is coming in by telephone. So we're going to have her photograph here. And Tara, are you with us?
I am. Hello.
Well, we're glad to have you with us, and as you know, someone that is a friend and colleague, Sudheer Shukla, who is with the Climate Change is Elementary, is right here as our special guest as well. But Tara, welcome to the Emerald Planet.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you here, and we're sharing some of these images which I sent to you since you can't see these since you're coming by phone. But tell us a little bit about your organization, the IATP. What is it and the importance?
Well, Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, it started in the mid-'80s in response to the farm crisis. And it began work mostly on trade policy and some of the international trade agreements, but since then our work has expanded. And I personally work on the rural communities team, and so focusing mainly on how climate change impacts rural communities and how it impacts agriculture. And IATP does a broad range of other work. We still have some folks that are focused more in the international arena and some people that are more U.S. policy focused, and then of course my team, which is focused more on the really local, on-the-ground impacts.
Now, looking at the rural communities, I know this is something that everyone gets enthralled with all the urbanizations going on around the globe, and now billions of people living in urban areas. But also, there's still billions of people living out in rural communities, whether it's the United States or around the globe. So why do we need to really be focused on rural communities when more and more people are moving into more urban areas?
Well, there's more and more people in the urban areas, but more of the land is classified rural. And the natural resources primarily reside in the rural areas. So all of those people that have moved to the urban areas are really dependent on rural America and the rural parts of whatever country they may be living in for their energy and for their natural resources and for really all of those raw materials that are making the goods that we we rely on in providing our energy.
Now, looking at the work that you're doing, I know being in or focusing on these rural communities, what is it about the rural communities and climate change that definitely has the attention of the IATP?
Well, rural communities are oftentimes dependent on natural resources for their livelihoods. So there might be agricultural-based communities or forestry-based communities or communities that produce some sort of energy as their main source of economic benefit. And climate change brings along with it drought and flood and more extreme weather events. And so if your livelihood is based on your farm and what your farm is growing, you're going to be affected more by the drought than somebody, say, that lives in an urban area and that can do their work from their office regardless of whether they've got 0 inches of rain, 10 inches of rain, whatever it may be. And when you think about forestry or energy, it's the same thing. A lot of the rural communities are more heavily hit by the extreme weather events because their economic livelihood is completely dependent on natural resources.
So looking at this climate change and the impact on rural communities, in many ways they may even be more sensitive to climate change. So what are you seeing in the United States and around the globe about the sensitivity or the potential negative impact of climate change on smaller and more rural communities?
Yeah, it really depends on part of the country that you're in. I mean, even right now, Minnesota is having a really heavy rain year, while California is having one of the worst droughts it's seen. And of course, we're all seeing more and more extreme weather events as far as storms and tornadoes, earthquakes, whatever it may be, and more of that's anticipated too. So it's really hard to predict, actually. Like, we're in a really wet year here in Minnesota, and yet a couple years ago we were hit by a drought, and the crops weren't able to grow for that reason.
Well, as you know, Sudheer is with us as our special guest. Sudheer, why don't you ask the next question?
Sure, Sam. So Tara, thanks for being able to join us. Can you tell us how you engage rural communities, how IATP talks to them in conversations about climate change?
Yeah, we have a number of initiatives going on. The first one that I'll mention is the Rural Climate Network. And that is an organization, or a network rather, of about, I think at this point, 30 organizations or so. And all of the organizations, they may not necessarily be headquartered in rural areas, but they all work with rural landowners in some capacity. So we have some farming organizations, some forestry organizations, some healthcare organizations, education, because really all of those sectors are hit by extreme weather. And so the network is a platform to share best practices, to disseminate information, to talk about what's going on in other parts of the country, because a lot of times there might be some really good things happening on the ground and they're not being shared across communities. They're really contained to that community. It might be working great there. And so we're trying to spread ideas that way. And then another initiative that we've got going on is the Rural Climate Dialogues. And we just had our first one, and we are in the works of planning the second. And the dialogues are in partner with the Jefferson Center, which is a group that uses a citizens jury method. And so the one that we just did in Morris, Minnesota, we were able to get mailing of all of the residents in Morris and send them out and then choose a randomly selected but demographically representative group of 15 people to come in and talk about what they wanted to see the Morris area do in response to climate change. So we had Mark Bailey, who is the state climatologist, come in, the city manager, some people from the local utilities, and really just talk about how their business is being impacted by extreme weather, by drought, by flood, by whatever it may be, heat, cold, talk about how energy costs will be affected, how parts of the city budget will be affected, and this group of 15 citizens were able to come up with a one-page executive summary of what they wanted to see their community do. And it was a 3-day process, and in that process there was time for them to wordsmith down to the exact word what they wanted that statement to say, how they wanted it to be presented to their neighbors. And in a way, that kind of product is much more valuable than anything that IATP could write up, because it's coming from the community and there's buy-in from the citizens, and there's a much larger chance that that will really spur change.
Well, that's really very important, Tara, and you're doing very important work through the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy. And also, we know that the farming in North America, in most cases, and many areas of Europe, say Australia, New Zealand, some of these countries, very large mechanized farming operations, where you go into many countries in Africa, India, and even some places in China and elsewhere. A lot of it's very small plots, very small farming operations. So how through your organization are you able to share and talk about, large scale farming versus small scale, and how this actually impacts on the supply of world crops, say all various types of grain, even the wood stocks, so that we increase the quality of life but have less impact on the environment?
Yeah, so I can speak from my perspective, which really is focused on U.S. agricultural production. I'm not extremely knowledgeable on some of the other crops grown around the world and the other climatic zones. But as far as in the U.S., some of the practices that are really integral to a healthy farm are applicable from the smallest scale up to the largest scale, and those are practices that increase soil resilience when it comes down to it, because healthy soil can filter water better, it can hold more water in times of flood, it can draw on its past water reserves in times of drought, and it can provide more nutrients to the plants, thereby minimizing reliance on synthetic chemicals. And so some of those practices that we try to encourage are crop rotation, so increasing the diversity of crops that are on a field, cover crops, making sure that that soil is covered up year-round rather than just when there is a crop growing on it. Really trying to move agriculture away from the monoculture practice that's become so prevalent today. So rather than growing one crop year after year on the same land, growing different crops in rotation.
Yeah, looking at this, this is something that we're looking at right now as far as just crop rotation and having various types of crops in the same soil, but make sure that you're actually going around. But looking at the energy input per crop on these rotations, we have just a little bit of time left. Is there anything here that actually our audiences really should know about?
As far as rotating crops?
Yes, the energy input per crop.
Yeah, well, there's certainly less cost for the farmer, really. They're going to need far less chemicals because monocultures also attract pests and disease at much higher rates than crop rotations. And so by rotating the crops, there's going to be less herbicide purchased, less pesticide purchased, and on the same token, there will be less runoff of those chemicals in rain events. So there will be less of those chemicals in our waterways, and there's not a lot of conclusive evidence on the human health impacts of agrochemicals, but there are a lot of signs pointing towards potential carcinogens, potential endocrine disruptors, potential reproductive effects.
Well, Tara, we're going to lose you. We're going to lose you, and I just want to say thank you for being with us. You've been an excellent host and excellent guest, and thank you for being with us on the Emerald Planet. You're doing outstanding work out there with the Institute for Ag and Trade Policy. This was Tara Ritter, Program Associate, and Sudheer. Thank you for being with us on the Emerald Planet, and thank you for being with us as we create the Emerald Planet.